Our next speaker is one of my fellow colleagues from Zabbix, a technical support engineer, and they will talk about alerting and escalations. What are the best practices and how you can put your mind at ease and sleep soundly and know that you will get notified only when it's critical and important. Let's welcome on the stage Tomass, my fellow colleague from support team. Tomass, welcome.
Hello, thank you for that introduction. Artur, I will start sharing my screen.
We can hear you. I'll let you know when we can see the screen.
Great.
Let's see.
No, not that screen.
Okay, we can right now see your desktop. Let's try resharing.
This one's it.
Okay, you are good to go, Tomass.
All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Tomass. As Artur said, I am his colleague here at Zabbix, one of the newest additions of the technical support engineer team. And today I'm going to be talking about some of the best practices around actions and escalations, and yeah, basically putting your mind at ease so you don't have to worry about much. Before we can get into some of the best practices, we probably should know what escalations and actions are. And before we can know what the escalations and actions are, we should know what are events. Well, events are basically occurrences that are registered when certain things happen. That could be trigger events, internal events, service events, discovery events, and auto registration events. But in our case today, we'll be taking into account the trigger events and the internal events. And in the case of trigger events, the event is that it registers when the trigger changes its status from okay to problem, from problem to okay. And yeah, and in the case of internal events, it means that item becomes unsupported, or the trigger goes into the unknown state, which is technically the third state of triggers, but nobody really speaks about that. All right, so then if we know what are events, what are actions then? Actions are basically a Zabbix functionality that allows you to execute operations when specific conditions are met. You can set specific conditions based on let's say triggers, trigger severities, hosts, host groups, tags, and you can create complex equations to, let's say, meet your specific, like very specific criteria to trigger an escalation, an operation basically. And yeah, when those conditions are met, you can start automatically sending out messages or executing scripts and so on and so forth. As you can see here in the screen, this is where you can define the name of your action, and here in the conditions, so to say, subpage or sub-level, you define those specific conditions. So in this case, for the operations to take place, your tag needs to equal production, and the time period needs to be during the workdays. Right, so now we know what are actions. What exactly are escalations? Now, escalations are basically the operations you define when creating an action. Now, that sounds like kind of a loop argument, but it really is what it is. Operations include sending notifications, executing scripts, and escalating unresolved problems to the higher ups. So let's say if your system administrator has not resolved the problem in, say, 8 hours, you escalate the problem to the boss. So he gives the system administrator a good chewing out, you know? Yeah, one more note about escalations is that when a problem is updated, in the update operations, you don't get, sorry, I messed up here. There are three, so to say, subparts in operations. First of which is the operations part itself, which includes those previously mentioned parts of sending messages or running scripts or escalating the problem to one of the higher ups. Then there's the recovery operations, which let you basically, for example, notify everyone who's involved when the problem is solved. And the update operations are when basically someone either acknowledges the problem or the severity is changed, someone comments on it, or if the problem is manually closed. So you can also say send a message to someone if someone has acknowledged the problem and is starting to work on it. So when am I getting into some of the best practices, which is what we're all here for? Good question. It's right now. And the first best practice that I would like to start off with is having a good structure. Since actions are based on triggers, they should be named as clearly as possible, so you have no confusion about what exactly you're getting notified for. Well, let's say, for example, you're getting a notification that host ABCD is having a stroke. I mean, that's not really useful. It would be much better if you defined your triggers and actions in a very clear way, so there's no confusion, which usually turns into time waste, right? So yeah, second best practice I'd like to tell you about is about trigger configurations. Also really important, since as I already mentioned, actions are dependent on triggers in some ways. One of the things that you can do is create dependent triggers, which will basically let you to block out useless notifications. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a server and a router that both have triggers configured for them and actions to notify when they go down. So let's say your router goes down, then you'll be getting notifications about both the server being down and the router being down. But if you created a dependent trigger that the server trigger depends on the router trigger, then once your router goes down, you automatically know that your server is also going to be firing off the trigger and sending you notifications for it. But if you define it as a dependent trigger, then you'll be only getting notifications for the router, which is gone down, right? And basically less headaches, less spam, everybody's happy like that. And then another part is flapping triggers that they will basically always exist in production environments, but you should try to still combat them as much as you can. And how you can do it is create timeframes for your problem detection. For example, if you're creating a creating a trigger for your CPU load. Now, let's say if your CPU load is higher than 4, it will send you a notification or fire off the trigger and create a problem. But if you if it spikes, right, it will send you a notification and then it instantly resolves, and then the notification was basically useless, and you just wasted a little bit of time by reading a message that your CPU load is high. And that's basically what flapping triggers are. And yeah, you can combat them basically in 2 ways. Firstly, you can create timeframes for your problems. That same CPU load example, you can create a trigger that measures the average CPU load over 5 minutes. So if your CPU load is higher than 4 over 5 consistent minutes, then the trigger will fire off and create a problem for you to start solving. And the second way is by delaying notifications on actions. And that will be the next topic, which I will talk about right now. Yeah, delaying notifications. Now, the first part of creating delayed notifications is to understanding how step durations work. So What I mean by that is, as you can see here in the presentation screen, in the subcategory operations, I have only two defined steps, step 2 and step 7. Now, why step 2 and step 7, not step 1 and step 2? As you can see here, my default operation step duration is set to 10 minutes. And if I set my step to 2, then it will not start the action immediately, as if it would if you were set it to step 1, because step 1 always executes immediately. But if I set step 2, it will execute in 10 minutes when the problem fires off. So that way, if you configure your triggers to use, for example, average CPU load, right? Like from the example I mentioned before, then you also have like another fail-safe that it won't send you useless notifications if you set your actions to fire off delayed, right? So yeah, and then once you do set your default step operation to 10 minutes, say you want to then create another step that sends a message to the higher ups or executes a script. If you were to set it to the step n+1, like if my first step is 2, then the second step would be 3, it would execute in 20 minutes. But to combat that, you simply calculate how much minutes would be times the steps, right? If that makes sense. So here you see my second step is at minute 10, and my 7th step is an hour. So yeah, this is also an easy way how to use both delayed notifications and still having control over the intervals that you are going to be using in your actions and operations. Right. Another note or a couple of notes about understanding how step duration works. This is a really quick bit. If you are to set your step operation 1-0, it will execute your first step indefinitely. And if you set your step as 1-3, then it will execute step 1 until step 3 is completed. So that's also about a little bit about how step durations work. Right, moving on. Now we're going to be talking about utilizing internal actions. I already talked a little bit about trigger actions, and one more thing that you can and should utilize is internal actions. Because let's say you have an action configured that depends on an item that is unsupported, right? If the item is unsupported, the trigger cannot gather data to be able to fire off and create a problem for you to see, right? So if you have a really important host, or not even an important host, any host at all, you should monitor its items for the unsupported state, since items can become unsupported for many reasons. Let's say a template has some non-applicable items to your host, or a script for some reason suddenly can't be executed. Or also there's some items designed with falling back to the unsupported state, as a fallback. For example, the VFS file time key, it will become unsupported if it can't access the file. So really utilize internal actions, check for your items, see if they are becoming unsupported, and if they are, you already know if they are, and then you can fix it, and then your triggers and actions are all healthy and working as they should be. Right, moving on. Do not drive your system administrators crazy. And what I mean by that is you should keep their working hours in mind. So for example, do not send them notifications during the weekend if it's not a critical problem that's going to crash your system or stop your production system from working. Or also don't call them in the night if the problem is not critical and it can wait, right? And another part of this is to assign corresponding problem severities to the notification type. So let's say you should probably only use SMS messages and calls for disaster situations. Also you can use emails and Microsoft Teams messages for regular problems. So yeah, keep it in mind, because a happy system administrator means a healthy infrastructure. So yeah, as you can see in the picture on the screen, in the screenshot, I have set as an example sending emails during the work days, 9 to 6, and for severities that are average, high, or disaster, seems pretty reasonable to me. And Microsoft Teams messages you can send all week, every single time of the day, because sometimes, I even don't check all my Microsoft Teams messages, since I know it will probably, I should not say this with colleagues in the call, but sometimes they are useless. And then, sending SMS messages for, say, only weekdays and only in the working hours for high and disaster level actions, I want to say. Right, moving on. But keep in mind that you also sometimes should drive your system administrator crazy if it is a disaster problem. Basically, what I'm talking about is intentional spam. And it can be useful in cases when, let's say, your production system has gone offline and it's a really critical part of your infrastructure and you need it to be up as soon as possible. So what you want to do is, for example, as I've said here, send an SMS message to the phone number any single day, any time of the night or day. If it's disaster severity, and here under the first screenshot, you can see that I have configured the default operation step duration to 2 minutes, and I've set the step to 1-0. And that means that it's going to indefinitely send SMS messages to your system administrator or whatever responsible party, and basically not let them rest until the problem is completed. So resolved. So no smoke breaks, no coffee breaks until the problem is solved. Because, well, not wanting to receive SMS messages every 2 minutes is quite a powerful motivator. So yeah, moving on. Number 7 is create user groups. Create user groups basically for notification purposes, because you don't want to send your notifications to parties that are not interested or that cannot do anything about the problem at hand, right? So yeah, when you are creating actions, you can easily specify your user groups that you want to send the notifications to, and this way you will avoid sending useless notification to uninterested parties. As you can see here in the screenshot, I have easily configured Linux sysadmins and MySQL admins. Now that's just an example. This is really up to your needs. You can define user groups for whatever users or teams you have in your organization. But yeah, just keep this in mind. Sending notifications to people who are not responsible or who cannot do anything about the problem is useless information. They will probably come complaining to you at some point that they are receiving useless notifications. So just be one step ahead of them. Right. Just a second.
We're getting some echo. Yes, guys.
Is it fine now? Yeah, it's fine. Okay.
I think it's fine. Try. I'll let you know. Continue. I'll let you know. If it's...
Okay.
Nope, there's still echo. Please mute the other mic or whatever's going on there.
All right.
Still echo. Technical difficulties, guys. Happens
to the best of us.
Yes,
right.
I think now it's fine.
Okay, thank you. And sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are now moving on to the 8th and last topic I want to talk to you about best practices regarding actions, is maintenance mode and problem suppression. Now, what maintenance mode and problem suppression is, it basically is a mechanism that allows you to suppress problems temporarily while you're performing maintenance on your machines or devices or whatever you want to call them. You can basically temporarily hide problems that will either prove useless since you're performing maintenance on your machine, And if you're performing maintenance on, let's say, your database server, and suddenly you're getting notifications that your database is down, well, you already knew that, since you are probably the one that typed the command that shut the database engine down, right? So either that, or also you can suppress problems that can wait till later. So let's say you're performing maintenance on a machine, and it's getting a bit too hard to, it's you're performing maintenance on a machine, and it starts reporting problems that either can wait, that the problems that can wait, you basically can suppress them, and they will start showing back up once the maintenance period is finished. And talking about the modes of maintenance mode, there are two modes: with data collection, which means that values will be collected, problems will be detected, but they will be suppressed, as you can see here on the screen. Maintenance mode machines are identified by this small little orange wrench icon next to your host's name. And if you click on it, you can see what maintenance is being performed, and what maintenance mode is it. And second maintenance mode is without data collection, which means that values may still be collected, for example, by your proxy, but the server will discard the values once they come into the server. So there will, if you use this without data collection mode, then you will have gaps in your graphs. But since you know that you're performing maintenance, it doesn't really matter. And one more note about this is that problem recovery and update operations are not suppressed, only the escalation. So the notification, message sending, or the script executing is suppressed, but the other two, the problem recovery and the update operations, are not suppressed. So you still will get messages about those. And here you can see how maintenance modes are configured. Here in the lower right screenshot, you can see that you define the period which you will have these maintenance, so to say, maintenance. I'm losing the word here. Anyways, when you're going to be doing maintenance, right? And then under there's periods, which once you click that, you open up this upper left part, and here you can easily define period type. So it can be monthly, weekly, daily, or one time only. If it is monthly, as it is here in my screenshot example, you can define every single month that you will want to do the maintenance on, day of the month, which hour and minute, and the length of the maintenance. So really useful stuff for, again, not receiving useless notifications. And that's pretty much it for the content part of this presentation. So now I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you a lot, Thomas. We do have quite a few. There was sort of a discussion going on about Zabbix alerting and where we excel and what we lack. So I think good feature requests could potentially come out of here. First off, it's a question in the chat, but maybe you could explain. And if you need some help, then let me know. We can do this together. In conditions and trigger action conditions, you have a condition called problem is suppressed, yes or no. How does that work? What does it mean? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I need help on this one.
Okay, so problem is suppressed. So when we, for example, have a suppressed problem, a problem that's suppressed by maintenance or manually suppressed, the trigger still fires, right? We just don't react on it because we are currently in maintenance. And if the problem is still there after the maintenance is over, we then notify you. For example, if we use pause suppressed problems option. With problem is suppressed, depending on the yes or no operator, we ignore that trigger and the problem generated by it. by the action. We completely ignore it, even if it's still there after the maintenance or whatever. You will not receive any emails or anything like that. So that's sort of one way. If you don't want to react in any shape or form to problems during maintenance, even if they're still there after the maintenance is over, then that's what problem is suppressed condition is there for. It can be a bit tricky because, like I said, there's maintenance, there's pause operations for suppressed problems, there's this here condition. I suggest them playing around with it in your test environment. We have a nice tool called Zabbix Sender that can be used to create sort of test items and see how that works. Create small maintenance windows, create actions with this condition and play around with it, see how it behaves. Because one thing is explaining in words, another thing is seeing it for yourself. Next up, when monitoring through proxy, when proxy is not available, we get notifications only that the proxy is not available. How to make notifications that all hosts behind proxies are not available. So how do I get notified, not just about the proxy, but about the hosts behind that proxy, individual hosts? Thomas, do you know the answer? It's also a tricky question. A small feature. Let me tell you. So there is a no data function that we can use for our triggers, right? And no data has two modes. One mode will not generate a problem if the proxy is unavailable. Another one will generate a problem, even if the issue with metrics not being available is because the proxy is down. So you need to select a proper mode. You need to create a trigger that uses no data and use the proper mode for it. Just search our documentation for no data. And then on your host, you would create triggers with no data functions and set them up accordingly on the host from which you wish to receive the alerts. How to get alerts outside the alerting window. For example, notifications are set to be sent from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but some event occurs at night at 22 p.m. so 10 p.m. But on 7 a.m., we do not get any notifications. Okay, so this, once again, this is very tricky. There are many ifs and buts here. So let's see. Notification should be sent from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. How have you configured this? Do you use maintenance? Is there a maintenance outside those hours? Or is that specified in the trigger expression, right? Because that changes a lot of things. If you're using maintenance, if it's in trigger expressions, you just answered in the chat, then that's just by design. You have configured it that way and that's it. If you use maintenance, if the problem occurs at night, if you have maintenance window outside from 7 to 7, right? If problem occurs within that maintenance window and still remains at 7 a.m., then you will receive a notification. Or maybe try and figure out some less sensitive way to create triggers. But yes, I see what you're saying. Maybe try creating multiple smaller periods, depends on your environment. I see maintenance being sort of the only solution for this, just to be honest with you, just using maintenance instead of specifying this directly in the trigger. Once again, we discussed, like I said, we had a discussion about this. Maybe it could be a feature request where you receive information about all problems that occurred during the night, for example, at the beginning of the day, no matter maintenance or no maintenance or whatever, something like that. Could be a feature request if we can sort of figure out how to not design it, but how to prepare it and state what we want. So to delay some notifications, we have to duplicate original action and add a filter. So if we want, well, actually, then we'd have two actions. One would react on everything and another one would react only on some things, and that would be duplicated. We would need to essentially exclude the events in action 1 and include them in action 2, the ones that we want to delay, because if they're overlapping, I think they would both, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves, both actions would generate alerts, send alerts your way. If they're duplicated and one just has a delay filter, you'd still get the alerts from action 1 and you'd get alerts with delay from action 2. So we need to find a way, maybe use tagging, for example. Tagging is a good way. Tag your delay triggers with one tag and tag your regular triggers that shouldn't be delayed with another tag, and then create actions that analyze those tags. This is where tagging can be very helpful. Okay, we have another question, and I think this is where Tomass can help us out a bit about dependent triggers. So can you explain once again? This is a question related to what if I have my Zabbix agent not available due to memory being 100% busy, and I want it to depend on a ping trigger. If ping is working, then there should be no alert. I think, Tomass, this is how dependent triggers work, right?
Yeah.
And you can, and you configure them in the triggers, make one depend on the other. In the trigger, you have a nice tab called dependent triggers or dependencies, I think. And that's where you would configure those triggers to depend on one another.
Yeah, that's basically dependent triggers, yeah.
All right, guys, we'll answer the other questions in text or at the end of the meetup. I want, for those of you who maybe don't have that much time to get the chance to experience the next presentation, thank you a lot, Tomass. Hopefully you will agree to join up for more meetups, and we'll see a lot more of you in the upcoming events. Thank you.
Bye-bye.